You are now listening to Out of the Blank.
Welcome to another episode of Out of the Blank podcast. I'm here with Jeff Blanchette. His name has a little bit of what we call a spicy mustard on it. What's up, Jeff?
How's it going, man?
So, Jeff, tell me a little bit about yourself.
Well, I am 27. I work as an operations manager at a Dave & Buster's type place, like an entertainment center. I enjoy watching sports. I run a podcast myself. Just a easygoing dude.
Sounds like a wonderful dating profile. I want to talk to you about, what do you do exactly at this Dave & Buster's type place? Do you just manage the machines or?
Yeah, I'm basically there to hire staff, supervise the building, take guest complaints, all that good fun stuff that comes with managing a building like that.
Do you find it a little weird to have a place like Dave & Buster's just because of the fact, like, the whole point of going out with your family is being able to have a conversation and kind of sit and eat? Kind of loses the whole aspect when there's so many games you can play.
Yeah, it's definitely a noisy environment, depending on where you are, because we have a bowling alley and then an arcade in the back and then like a full service bar. So we're trying to gear towards an entire family environment. Like, you can't vape or open carry or anything like that because it's private property. But there's a little something for everyone, depending on your age group. But it's definitely not that easy to carry a casual conversation.
Do you find it a little bit weird and a little strange that people are becoming less connected nowadays? Especially, like, you look at a place like family dinners don't really happen anymore. And if you look at a place like Dave & Buster's or some other gaming type place, it seems like everybody's disconnected even without those things even being there. Like, your phone is now the main priority when you go out to eat with your family.
Yeah, and I think that comes with the territory of where we're going as a society. Not necessarily a bad thing, but if you look at families, now it's more of like, back in the day, it used to be like the mom was the stay-at-home mom, and she would take care of the family and cook and raise the kids and all that, while the father was out working a full-time job and being the breadwinner of the family, if you want to say that. But now both spouses are taking full-time jobs, and right, so now they have to find babysitters for the kids, and with Uber Eats and DoorDash and all that, you can just, it's at your fingertips. You can just order food and it's there, so you don't have to.
Dude, we're living in a freaky time, man. Let me tell you, my cousin got caught in the rain while he was riding on his bike, and usually I would have just rode through the rain when I was a kid, but he told me, he was like, I had to call an Uber to pick me up. I heard that, and a little part of my soul died, because I'm realizing that kids we're being way too reliant in general on technology. It kind of scares me in a way.
Yeah, it's actually insane. Like, when you were raised as a kid, at least I was, we were like, hey, don't talk to strangers, don't talk to people you don't know. But now here we are, like, literally calling strangers to come pick us up in their car. Like,
exactly. We're literally doing the exact opposite. We're getting in the stranger's car, because they actually, and they do give you candy. That's the only thing I think our parents kept right in the little warning that they gave us. They do give you candy. And all you have to do
5-star rating, man.
Yeah, all you got to do is get that 5-star rating. So is this obviously, is this not something you want to do for the rest of your life, right? Like, what did you have a option or type of passion that you have deep down you wanted to kind of fulfill?
Kind of. I've always been considered like the funny one of the bunch of for my friends. So I've always wanted to do something in the entertainment industry type thing, like whether it be stand up or I was streaming on Twitch for a little while. But that was too much of a time sink, so I had to give that up. I didn't really have time to do anything else. So that's why I kind of started a podcast to still kind of fill that itch, that scratch, I guess.
Tell me a little bit about your podcast.
So it's called Dread Talk, where me and one of my buddies, we investigate like paranormal hauntings, stuff like that. Like, we go out to these sites in Southeast Texas to just see what's there. Like, people that have said they've seen ghosts in this area, or there's a haunted road. We go and check it out with a camera, audio recorder, spirit box, to try to communicate with spirits and whatnot. But it's kind of funny because neither one of us actually believe in ghosts, but we just wanted to do it from a skeptic's point of view, I guess. So it kind of gets a different feel to it.
Have you seen anything that would be considered paranormal or supernatural?
So again, the first time we went out, we went to this place called Sarah Jane Road. It's in like south of Beaumont. And we ended up seeing a like white reflection. It looked like a reflection, but it wasn't like reflecting off of anything, if that makes sense. And we thought it was just a reflection of the sign like behind the trees somewhere, until we saw it cross the road and actually like move. So we were like, hold on. So we ended up bouncing pretty quick from there. And then we've heard some weird stuff. Like I have an EMF meter. And we went to a place in Katy called the Katy Magnolia Cemetery. And whenever we went to this one tomb where this witch was supposedly buried, there's an epitaph on the tombstone that where if you read it aloud and at the gravesite, then it supposedly brings you bad luck. So naturally, we had to test that theory, and my buddy read it out loud. And we started walking away, and then the EMF meter started going off. And we were like, well, that's kind of weird. Like the further we got away from the tombstone, the more like the reading got higher.
I got to send you to one of these guys I podcast with. His name is Michael Simons. He lives in Texas too, but he's a big believer in the supernatural, paranormal. He did a test with a Ouija board. He made his own, and then he left it alone and had a video camera on it and tried to like see what would happen. And he was picking up some weird noise in the background, like that. Like he locked the door to the room, made sure no one was in it. He was sitting downstairs watching it on a separate camera of his podcast room, and he was just seeing a bunch of weird stuff. He also had like these tapes of things. Like he played one that I was listening to. It was so freaky because they were in this like abandoned building where apparently a bunch of people died or something. And they were like asking questions, and they kept hearing noises, and all you hear is something go, listen, like out of nowhere. And like, it gives you goosebumps, like literally just hearing it, like right in your ear saying, listen. It sounded like a woman. And he goes, there was nobody. Like he showed me everything, the video. It was just him and his buddy in this room. There was no way possible that it could be anything and else but a ghost. And I always chalk up to the same fascination of why people have it with a belief in Bigfoot and all these types of things. Like I'm interested in Bigfoot only because it's not out of the realm of possibility. I think if you start kind of blocking off or becoming closed-minded when it comes to supernatural things, even though some of them seem a little bit like horse shit, there are some that seem like it has a bit of truth to it.
Yeah, it's actually funny you bring that up. In our last episode that we recorded, we haven't put it out yet because I still have to edit it. We actually interviewed one of my buddies who is a huge believer in Bigfoot, and he's super knowledgeable about all that kind of stuff. Like I know when you see stuff on TV and in movies, it kind of embellishes it and makes it more unbelievable than I guess it is. But we asked him all these questions because both of us are skeptics, like I said. So we were asking him all these questions, like, okay, what about this? Like, why have we not seen more sightings and blah blah blah? And he had an answer for literally everything. It was actually really interesting. And the reason we had him on to talk about Bigfoot was our last episode. We went to this other place in Huntsville. It's called the Martha Chapel Cemetery, and it was out in the middle of nowhere. And there was like a big forest everywhere around, and we heard this like wailing in the distance, and it kept getting louder. And when we're out there, we're thinking like, oh man, like that's a person, and he sounds like he's in pain. Like maybe he's a hiker or something out in the middle. It was like 2 a.m. So I don't know why he'd be hiking, but it sounded like a human at first. Then when it got closer, it sounded more like human at first, but then there was like a growl at the end of it, so it sounded a little like animalistic. And so we just bolted. We were like, dude, no, we're leaving.
Oh yeah.
And the more I went back and like listened to it and thought about it, I was like, hey, this is actually like really similar to what my buddy said Bigfoot sounds like, supposedly. So we brought him on to listen to it.
One of the biggest comedians is a full-on believer in Bigfoot, Bobcat Goldthwait.
Mhm.
That dude is like, you talk to him, you're like, how are you interested in Bigfoot? But he starts answering every single question you ask him with such response that it's like, oh shit, like you have this planned out. You know exactly what you're talking about. And he wrote a book on it and did like a documentary thing on it too, Chasing Bigfoot. Like, but that's not just with Bigfoot though. It's with anything. I think the factor is we take it to an extreme with the storytelling and the capturing of Bigfoot. I think it becomes like if someone actually does see something, maybe like another ape or something, it can be easily mistaken. You know, ghosts get mistaken for that shadow perception. Usually, like, you know, if you're in a dark room somewhere, you start seeing like moving shadows, those types of things. Your mind starts playing tricks on you. It starts to go a little bit crazy. Um, you know, it's the same thing. Like, I don't know if you're a big believer in UFOs or those types of things, but like with the pilots that are coming out saying they saw these flashing orbs in the sky, and people are just saying it's a type of perception effect that you get when you're flying at night. Your eyes become distorted because there's nothing really to focus onto besides like the little stars. And since global warming has increased and all these types of things, like if you go out at night now, if you look up, there's not as many stars as back maybe 100 years ago
Mhm.
because they're just not able for us to see because they're covered up by something in the ozone. So if you take that, and in no way I'm not a scientist, but hearing a pilot say like he's flying and there's this weird orb that just comes out of nowhere, whether you want to chalk it up to ball lightning or these weather phenomenons that we do experience, it's not out of the realm of possibility that there could be something out there that could be unexplained. Do I think it's aliens, like a bunch of guys sitting in a UFO ready to probe you in the ass? No. But at the same time, I don't know. I think we it's the listening effect. The fact that like you tell a kid one thing and then you ask them to pass it down a line of kids. By the end, you get to the last kid after 50 kids have been all whispered in their ear and told all these different things. That last kid's going to have a really, really messed up story compared to the one you originally created to tell the first kid. Because it's being passed down by people, by people, by people. It's the same thing with folklore. After generations and generations of retelling and resaying, things get added and things get jumbled up that you lose the true aspect of things.
Right. And I think a lot of that has to do with just when you hear like all the false stories and things, since we have YouTube now and, podcasts and everything like that, every time you hear a fake, like a story that's obviously made up and embellished, then that kind of takes away from the people who are there who have really experienced something and have something legitimate to talk about or an experience to share. It kind of can divert those people away. Like, well, that's clearly fake because I saw this video on YouTube one time and it was faked. So it goes back to that. But with aliens, I don't know. Like, I feel like if there weren't other species out there, then it would be weirder than if there weren't. You know what I mean? This universe is just way too big for there not to be something else out there similar to us or just another living being. Um,
Well, I mean, like we have so much stuff that's unexplained about the Earth. I gotta point you over to my buddy's podcast. You probably like. It's called The Uncanny Earth. Uh, like he focuses on demonology, all these types of things, and all these weird coincidences, like secret societies, all these things. I tell people nothing is technically out of the realm of possibility. I've talked to people that have psychic abilities. I am kind of have a bit of it only when I'm not a full believer of it, but I've had deja vu a lot, and that's known as like clairvoyance and seeing like types of objects and stuff. And it's been like in my family history, there's been people that have like talked to spirits. Do I believe that? Not really, just because I haven't experienced it. But I have had a dream where someone has gone missing, and then someone asks, like, I'll randomly say a dream to like my mom or something, and she'll be like, can you look at something for me? And it's a photo. And I'm like, that's the guy from my dream. And she's like, well, where was he? And this happened like recently. And I'm like, he was near a body of water, but it wasn't like an ocean. It was like a canal. And then they found him not even a day later after I gave her that information. Now that could have been a coincidence. Like I said, I'm not saying I'm an all power psychic or something like that, but I say it's just like the movie Sixth Sense, the kid that can see ghosts and he doesn't know. He think that's what the average person has. I think it's you got to chalk it up to the fact it's like a radio frequency. I believe there's people that are sometimes tuned into different channels. I don't think it's like The Exorcist where the power of Christ compels you, like that demon type possession and stuff. That it's very hard for me to believe, but I'm trying to understand it as much as possible. But I think it's a little bit less than that. I think people can get consumed by like bad energy, and to think about ghosts, do I think it's a spirit that passed on and still stays upon the earth? No, I think it's more of an imprinting of their memory, like an echo.
Gotcha. Yeah, no, that makes sense. I've heard a bunch of different theories of what people think ghosts are, whether it's, an imprint, like you said, or, a spirit, like their soul, remaining here because they don't know they're dead, or maybe a lot of it is just people seeing things. And, when you go looking for, like with me, like when I go out and you're in a graveyard in the middle of the night looking for spirits, you try to attune anything that moves, or if you hear the grass behind you, you automatically think, oh, here it is. Like this is paranormal. So I think if you go looking for something like that, you're going to try to fit anything to into your narrative to make it kind of fit what you're looking for.
Plus, it's hard to decipher if it's truly something going on or if it's just your brain playing tricks on you. Because like it's nighttime. I mean, I've been riding my bike middle of the night, midnight before, and start to feel like I'm hearing things in the background. I mean, sometimes you're watching a scary ass movie, and you're literally like looking around, like making sure there's nobody around you. You know what I mean? I think it's the whole factor is the same reason why society is obsessed with jump scare games, like that game Slenderman. Okay, there's what you laughed. So, what about Slenderman do you find ridiculous?
Um,
Everything.
yeah. I mean, I don't know. It all depending on how you look at it. It can all seem ridiculous, and then you see some instances where it's like, well, this could be legit. Like, I don't know. It kind of like takes me out of that skeptic realm for a little bit, because like for me as a skeptic in all things, like I want to see it to believe it, like for myself, which is why another reason why I wanted to start this podcast, because I wanted to go out and experience these things for myself, instead of living vicariously through someone else through their experiences. And it's been interesting so far, for sure.
Now, when you say interesting, have you seen the experiences, like the stuff you've gone out and did, or the people you've met?
More of the former. We haven't really met anyone through the podcast. We're only like, three or four episodes in at this point, and we haven't really teamed up with anybody with it. That's why I'm trying to. I've been trying to reach out to other, paranormal enthusiasts in the area to see if we can do like a joint kind of investigation type thing, where it's not just from our perspective, but maybe they have some techniques or something they've done, or they know other places that uh, they know to be haunted, to kind of check those places out and get a different perspective on it. But yeah, so far it's just been more of the experiences where that yelling at the end of the last place we went was definitely the creepiest thing I've ever experienced, because it was whenever we pulled up, like I'm not a very easily scared person. Like I'll get out and explore whatever. Like I've been in cemeteries and like abandoned buildings, it's whatever. But this place, like as soon as we pulled up, I just had this very uneasy feeling, like we should not be here, and I did not want to get out of the car. And I had to like convince myself, like, hey, you drove like 3 hours away. You gotta get out now. I was like, yeah, all right. So then we heard what we heard, and that just kind of like, nah, like we bolted out of there very quickly.
I mean, when it comes to like getting like like for instance, like with cryptids, like the New Jersey Devil. I don't know if you know a lot about him, but I watched that on the X-Files like when I was a kid. And I started thoughting I was hearing things outside my window, that type of thing that was putting me in a state like where I was just freaking out. Literally, to where I was sleeping, and I could see shadows from like a nightlight. Yeah, that's right. I had a nightlight. I'll admit to it. And it was putting up like I thought I was seeing the shadows morph like monsters. It's where creativity is. It's you see the downside of it. Like there's a lot of things that can't be explained. My buddy, like for me being an insomniac, that whole factor is you tend to hallucinate sometimes too. Uh, like my buddy sleeps with his eyes opened. It's the weirdest thing I've ever seen in my entire life. But he has these types of things where he experiences sleep paralysis, and it throws his mind into fear. And sometimes he feels like he's talked about seeing like hallucinations of like monsters and stuff that are coming to get him. I'm like, dude, you're 24. Like you're scared of monsters. And you say that, and he's like, it's not the fact that he believes in it, it's the fact of being paralyzed. Like, you have nothing to do to stop it if it was real. And I've talked to people that say they've talked to ghosts, they do it on an average day, they help them move to the other side. Do I believe in it? No, because I have not experienced it yet. But do I think it's out of the realm of possibility? I have no clue. I try and stick a little bit away from the paranormal, and kind of fall a little bit more on the cryptid lines, because that just seems a little bit more evidence we're going to find, I guess, just because there's 2.2 million species left undiscovered on land and 6.8 left undiscovered in the sea. So to think that Bigfoot or some Loch Ness monster type thing isn't out there, that's just it. That just seems stupid to me.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, yeah, it's crazy how much we haven't even discovered on land. But when you talk about under the sea, as a Little Mermaid would have it, yeah, I mean, it's crazy like how big like we have obviously more water than land on Earth, and it goes super deep. Like if you talk about Mariana's Trench, I mean, that's who knows what's down there. Like we can't even have a vehicle to get us down deep enough where the pressure wouldn't just swallow us up and kill us. But there's things down there that thrive in that kind of environment. It's just crazy, like what it would look like or what it would sound like. And I mean, I'm not going to explore it, but if I see pictures, I'll definitely take a look.
Like, there's the one documentary on Netflix called Dino Fish. I don't know if you've ever heard of it, but they discovered a 600 million year old fish, like around the dinosaur age. Like that's what they predated it to. And I'm hearing that, I'm like, hold on. Now, if it was 600 million or it was 60 million, but the whole factor is they found this fish that was basically around the same dating period as the dinosaurs, and it's called Dino Fish, and it was off the coast of it was somewhere in the coast of Somalia or something. But these pirates, these people, were throwing dynamite and exploding their habitat, which caused them to come up to the surface, where people were selling this fish on the side of the street. And a scientist actually walked by and was like, holy shit, that's not a normal day fish, like this, even for this area. So he decided to analyze it, and he predated it back then. And I think the reason why he was explaining was the fact that time moves differently down there. In the deepest parts of the ocean, time seems to stand still. An hour, it's like the movie Interstellar, where they spent like an hour on that one planet, but it was 7 years on ours.
Mm-hmm.
That's what it is basically deep down in the sea, because the pressure and the whole environment is just completely different. And especially when there's no sunlight, you can't tell really the passage of time. And it seemed they were talking about like that's why it stayed around for so long, and that's why it lived forever, basically, because the whole factor was it was a whole different place. You hear something like that, and then you want to close your mind off to the idea that Nessie or something like that isn't real. I'm like, dude, there might be something. You know what I mean? It gives you a little bit of hope for those skeptics.
Yeah, for sure. And that's what being a skeptic is all about to me, is like you don't want to just immediately say like, nope, that can't happen, and then just shut your mind off to it. Like you have to keep your mind open to all these possibilities. That doesn't mean you believe in everything you hear about, but you have to come at it with an open mind to the possibility that something like that could be a thing, like with Bigfoot. Or maybe it's not the exact Bigfoot that we think it is, but it could be some kind of variation of that. So it definitely irks me when people say like, nah, not a thing. Like unicorns, I mean, never seen one. I don't think they exist, but I'm not going to say that they couldn't. Then that's for anything until I see definitive proof that something does not exist, which is really difficult to do.
I think it's the whole fascination that we want mystery in a life that is kind of bland and boring. We want something unexplainable, something that seems powerful and like godly in a way. I think that's the same reason why people get hooked onto religions. If I had to ask you, what would be your favorite thing in Dread Talk that you talk about, or something that you're fascinated with, what would it be?
I don't know. Recently, I've been diving really deep into demonology in general. That's what kind of sparks my interest the most. I've just recently got into a book called Hostage to the Devil, which is a story about 5 contemporary people who were possessed, and we performed exorcism on them. And that's super interesting to me because I'm not religious myself, but it definitely interests me seeing how, you know, whether it's real or not, like the possessions, if it's just, you know, severe mental illness, or if they are legitimately getting possessed by a demon like from hell. It's very fascinating to me, and that's what I want to kind of dive into next. I've been trying to reach out to some religious figures to try to get them on the show to, you know, talk about it, but it's a very taboo subject, so it's really difficult to get someone in that world to come on out in public and talk about it like that.
Well, see, the problem is how religious kind of handles that situation. What's your depiction of a demon? I would say, because like the reason why I think religion is so strict when people like don't really want to talk about this is the whole factor of as soon as you bring up anything about religion, people get a little bit like nervous and get a little scared around each other because they don't know someone else's views on it. And when they say demons, they look at it more of like a giant red monster, like Satan is depicted as a giant red being with horns and hooves and all these types of things. Do I think it's like that? Not really. I think it's more of the same concept that Little Nicky was about. You know, I'm Little Nicky. Is because the whole factor is, I think they're just, you know, like people with black eyes, but I think it's an evil spirit. You know, it's like a black cloud inside of them, something evil force like that. Do I think it's some giant monster with a pitchfork that's stabbing Hitler in the ass? I don't know. But at the same time, that's just my concept of it, which makes it a little bit more believable when it comes to energy and kind of forces.
Yeah, I don't really, never really thought about, you know, what I would picture a demon looking like realistically, if one did, you know, exist. Um, I think it would definitely look different in human form, I guess, like if it was to be on Earth, like by itself, not inside of another person. Um, you know, I think it may not even be visible to us at all if it's just an energy that's here. It's like a soul, I guess. Because something I read about in the Demonologist, it was about, you know, the Warrens, the people from The Conjuring, and they said how there's, you know, different type of spirits. There's the human spirits, which we are, you know, able to interact with better, and they're not as malicious in certain cases. And then you have the inhuman spirits, which are like demons. And, you know, when you see stuff on Paranormal Activity, you know, movies like that, when you see, you know, fridges getting lifted up off the ground, and chairs being moved and stuff like that, more of that kind of stuff would be an inhuman spirit doing that, because apparently a human spirit wouldn't be able to manifest itself to, you know, have the expend that much energy to do something like that. So I thought that was really interesting.
What's really crazy is if you look at that, there's so many things that fight the opposite side too. When it comes to, they think of it of some like a spirit picking up a fridge would be known as a vengeful ghost, a ghost that has like left unfinished business here or something, or was killed and wants revenge. So they're like constantly being a brutal force. I think one show that really kind of opened me up to this type of stuff, I don't know if you've ever looked it up. It's called Supernatural.
Hmm.
Um, that's a really actually interesting show. They kind of create a little bit of laughter and also drama at the same time. Like it's the only one I think I kind of don't want to admit to watching, but it is a good show on the concept of it does teach you about a lot of weird things, like just at least the believable and the paranormal a little bit, like just to be skeptical. Like do spirits, okay. Do I think my concept of it is I don't know if I want to be cremated because of the fact that I feel like it's like the Egyptians, you know, how they put coins on your eyes in the afterlife. So, because your body and they mummify you so your body would last, because that would be your, like when you die, your body on earth is basically the body you're taking to heaven too. It's that spirit. Your spirit's going to look like that body. So then I started thinking, so then it's going to decompose. So your spirit's going to decompose while you're in the afterlife. Then I was like, imagine the people that go and get turned into ash and all these types of things just to save space, I guess. But I'm like, I hear that. I'm like, yo, imagine you die, you're in the afterlife, they start burning your body to cremate you, and you're just sitting in there and you randomly burst into flames like, oh my God, I'm on fire, even after I'm dead. You know, like I hear that. That's what scares me. I'm like, nah, just throw me in the ground, to be honest with you. If my spirit starts getting decomposed by worms, I don't care. But it scares the crap out of me, man. You know, Sam Kinison had a bit about that, about there's like people that were having sex with dead bodies, And he was like, he goes, see that? Life keeps fucking you in the ass long after you're dead. And like, I heard that, and like, if people were like, oh my God, how could you say that? I'm like, but it's, if you think about it though, that is a kind of a weird concept. Like, we die and our spirit leaves our body. People like to associate the spirit with our heart, in the chest, that area. Well, a doctor can take anything out of your chest and it will still be you. He can replace you, give you a new heart. It's still you. But if he touches your brain, that's where it messes the whole thing up. You don't become the same person anymore. You're not going to be the same guy you were going in before the surgery. Something could happen. You might hit something, might replace something wrong. Next thing you know, you have something weird about you.
Yeah, there's definitely not a brain transplant happening unless you want to completely.
Actually, sad to say, just recently, I think it was like last week, they now successfully are able to do head transplants.
Oh, Jesus.
Yeah. It started in China. Some scientists went over
don't know
there.
What could possibly go wrong with that? But
well, we started with stem cells, okay, and then we moved over, and to even get stem cells, like now it's here, like we have that here. People are able to get stem cells shots and all these types of things. It's very influenced in America, but we started that off in China because nobody was open to it here. You weren't allowed to do it. Mel Gibson has a story about his dad that got stem cells, like was at basically the brink of death at 94 years old. Then he got stem cells, and now he's completely fine. Like runs outside again, does all these types of things where he was impaired before, and then that got incorporated here, but he had to go overseas to do that. Then the head transplant. Okay, so they've been practicing recently on dogs and monkeys, and they successfully took out a monkey's spine and put it back into its body and actually healed it from paralysis. So now they're going to start incorporating that here, hopefully helping victims who experience like not being able to move their legs, being able to replace a certain part of your vertebrae and fix it. That's awesome. But I don't want it to get to the point that I know society is going to take it where we're going to start putting our brains in different bodies when we start getting too old. I
that
see that as a Trump scenario.
he's going to be the immortal president.
Oh, Jesus.
Be his greatest accomplishment.
I think his hair is his greatest accomplishment. But
That's true.
I think the fact is it starts turning into like Total Recall. You know what I mean? You're not the whole idea like we erase who you are and we implant memories in you, but the one movie where the billionaire was like on the brink of death, so he transferred his body into that one movie with Ryan Reynolds. He transferred that body into that body, and then he was living a whole different life, but he was living with the face of somebody else. I don't want to get to that point because then that really brings up the really sketchiness of human ethics. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that kind of goes into the whole realm of that. I forget what it's called, but the I guess the what's the word for it? I don't know. But where if you take a part from a boat and replace it, then at what point, like if you keep replacing parts, like is it the same boat? If you replace all the parts one by one, and then the boat you have is a completely different boat than before, but like it's still considered the same boat. So at what point, if you replace a part on a human, does it not, is that not the same person anymore? Like if you replace an arm or replace a lung or a heart, brain.
I think the point where we start like my buddy's all for getting all these gene chips and things. I think it's going to end up being a requirement, much like having an ID to buy a thing of cigarettes or buy alcohol. You're going to have to start it'll start off like, hey, to purchase this, there's this place that'll accept this cash payment in the form of whatever on your arm, like a barcode on your arm, like that movie with Justin Timberlake. And
Yeah.
I'm like, eventually it's gonna be implemented, then it's gonna be required, and then society's gonna split. There's gonna be people that get the gene chip, and there's gonna be people that don't get the gene chip because they don't want that much technology. The factor is, how much can I take out of you until you're not you anymore? I think it goes to the far as the extent to say maybe your dick. If you touch my dick, it's probably not me anymore.
Yep.
I consider that holy to me. So, but I think it goes to that. I think people want to improve their own life, but they want the cheap way to do it. They don't want to go the hard route with things. The fact that I would rather want Google Translate in the back of my brain or like the internet in the back of my head to be able to look up information constantly because I don't have all the time to look it up myself. But if people start getting a gene chip in the back of their head, I already know where it's going to go. There's going to be people that are going to use it in the best intent that society had for it. And there's going to be the freaks that are watching porn in the middle of class. And yeah,
As
I
if they're
know.
not doing that already anyway.
Yeah, I know that category. This is just going to be an easier way to get there.
Oh yeah. And then you got the people, the conspiracy theorists and everybody else out there who doesn't trust the government, which, I mean, it's understandable to a certain extent, but they don't want, any more access to, or giving people routes to more access to their brains than they already have. Like the people who think that they like think of something and then all of a sudden they're seeing ads for it on Facebook. It's like, well, like how much access do you guys really have?
Literally, like I was talking about something in a podcast, and next thing I know, I'm on my phone and I got an advertisement for that. Like, hey, podcasting essentials. So I'm like, what the like, I haven't done anything that would let you know I podcast. I have all my own personal private stuff. It brings up to the concept, like, with all technology that keeps coming out, can you explain to me some of the stuff you use dealing with like going on these ghost hunts or just going on these kind of ventures that you do?
The technology with it?
Yeah, because if you said a spirit talker, I'm sitting here like, what is that, like a radio, and you just kind of keep hitting the frequency button until you find a channel that feels like it's on the same channel as a ghost?
Something like that. So basically, it's a radio that scans through channels at a very fast rate, and you can change the rate depending on how you want it. But it'll scan. I think it's like I want to say it's probably about 10 channels a second. You can have it like that to where it's constantly creating white noise, which creates an avenue for spirits to communicate with, like through the spirit box, essentially. So if you hear a word that gets said over, half a second or more, then that's supposedly a spirit talking to you, because it's, three or four different channels that it's going through. So it can't be the same, person throughout those channels, creating a word. And we've actually heard some really weird stuff from it recently. We went to graveyards and whatnot.
Have you been a little bit more believable into it since you started this podcast and started doing these things? Have you kind of fallen in a little bit, or you still consider yourself as like a bit of a kind of ignored to the fact that there might be something out there?
I don't know. I mean, I'm still not sold on it. My buddy has become less of a skeptic, is what he's told me since we've started. I don't know. I'm pretty hard to convince. So I would need something more solid. At this point, like actually seeing something like legit, like right in front of me, like, okay, this is for sure something supernatural and not human. We've heard some crazy stuff, but a lot of that can just be attributed to being out in the middle of nowhere, at 2 or 3
Plus
a.m.
the psychological tricks your brain kind of plays on you. The same fact that like if a bunch of people start saying they're sick, you'll start to feel sick. It's called psychogenic illness. You start to experience actual symptoms of being sick. You basically convince yourself of being sick. So you start hearing things like that. You start seeing like brain disorientation when it comes to delusions. Like you start to see shadows moving around in the corner of your room, all these types of things, hearing sounds just because you're in a creepy place. I mean, the weirdest thing that a lot of people always give evidence to, that the fact that ghosts and all this supernatural type stuff is not real, is the fact that a lot of the stuff or evidence that comes out about it is around the same time Halloween is. So people are already dressing up the neighborhood like probably a month in advance. Walmart kind of goes 8 months in advance. They put up all the Halloween decorations. I'm like, dude, we're in freaking January. Like, what are you doing? Like, we're just getting it out there in case it does come up.
Never know.
So I think you start throwing stuff out like that. I think there's a little bit, when it comes to folklore, there's a little bit of truth behind it. Like the boogeyman, these types of things. Do I think they're powerful spirits, or that things that are hiding in my closet waiting for me to do, or waiting for me to get off my bed so they can grab me and throw me under? I don't know. But I like to believe that if there's a boogeyman out there and he's hiding in my closet, he's a nice guy and probably didn't like my years between 12 and 15, 16 when I was discovering my body. It was probably an awkward time for both of us now, knowing if he was in there. But I think it's the whole factor of, you have to look at everything with a slighted view, but you can't have a closed mind on it. So with you experiencing these types of things, you still aren't 100% confirmed that these things exist out there. Do you feel like you're trying to be as open-minded as possible?
Yeah, definitely. I'm just going in with an open mind for sure. Like I don't want to close myself off to any possibilities. But at the same time, I'm definitely taking a step back and really looking at things closely and not, trying to just convince myself that it's just me seeing things or, my mind playing tricks on me. Especially, knowing the whole, psychological aspect of it when you're out in the middle of a graveyard at 2 a.m., 3 hours away from your house. I mean, it could be something supernatural. It could not be. Most likely, I would think it would not be. You're just going to attribute all those scary noises and things to something supernatural when you're out there looking for something supernatural. So it's definitely just trying to keep an open mind, but keep a you know be realistic about your expectations when you're going out and searching for things like this.
Yeah, after my buddy created his Ouija board, he started sending me pictures all the time. Like, look at this ghost. Like, and he's sending me like it's literally a fly going across his camera, but he has the night vision on. And he's like, "You see that green dot?" I'm like, "Dude, it's a bug." He's like, "No, it's not, man. That's what I thought." But I was looking at it very. He starts sending me all these like kind of bolstering things he's been thinking about. I'm like, "You've thought long and hard about this." He's like, "Dude, this happened a week ago. I've been thinking about it ever since." I'm like, he's like, "You see the curtain move in the background?" I'm like, AC? You have an AC vent near that curtain? He's like, yeah, but it wasn't on. I'm like, okay, didn't happen to just kick on and then kick right back off, something like that. He goes, but dude, and he's like, I get it, because he has seen some stuff that makes him very, very, very skeptical and pushed him towards that. But you also need to know between fact and fiction. The fact is, any TV show that out there that goes and tries to experiment with ghosts or try and hunt down ghosts, they never do it right. They're 45 minutes of a waste of time. They are fun and anticipating, but the whole time it's like, did you hear that? Did you hear that? Johnny, did you hear that? And then next thing you know, it's like 45 minutes later. We didn't find any ghosts, but it's not to think that they're not out there. I'm like, I just wasted my afternoon. Thank you. It's like, but I was a kid watching those things and I would get hooked into them. Next thing I know, they never found one at the end of each episode, or they would find something weird. I think the closest one they got was when they went to Alcatraz and they started doing all that stuff, like doing all the experimental EMP stuff there. I do think with a place where there is a high amount of death, like when they go to mental institutions, like crooked ones that have been shut down because people have died and people were like killed or tortured, that's where I start to pick up the concept of maybe there might be echoes, like a place is stained with the blood of violence. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
Which
Yeah,
really brings up the place of like a haunting or something. That makes sense.
right. Yeah, that's definitely asylums and prisons. I think they actually had an episode of Supernatural on that where they went to a prison where someone was killed, like brutally murdered, and there ended up being the spirit there, but it wasn't actually the inmate that was the killer, like the killer spirit. It was actually like the nurse that was there. Um, so yeah, it's definitely, it's like I would love to go to an abandoned insane asylum or like a hospital. There's actually this hospital called Yorktown Memorial Hospital that's been shut down, and that's like a huge thing in Texas, a huge like tourist attraction for paranormal enthusiasts. Um, that's apparently haunted, but you have to book months ahead of time to get a tour. So me and my buddy were like, you think they have security over there? Like just kind of go. But yeah, it would be nuts to try to investigate a place like that instead of just like an open road or like a graveyard.
Well, it makes me like, I mean, I don't want to go anywhere near those places. Honestly, they can keep it all to themselves. But like, I think it's when you start looking at like the fact that Stranger Things was based on the Montauk Project. I don't know if you ever heard about that. It's like a apparent conspiracy theory, but a lot of the stuff that I don't know if you ever seen Stranger Things, but
Mhm.
it deals a lot like that girl and that beast she created. That was apparently something that was known in the Montauk Project. The government was experimenting with, seeing like they conjured up some type of monster. Now, I think the show takes it down a deep, deep rabbit hole. You probably have to look up more about the Montauk Project, but like the government has been known. There was a program they did where they literally had a group of scientists together. They made them all think of a person, like a character. All right, they all thought about like what his job was, what his family was, gave him a whole history. Then they killed him. They said they just killed him off. Like the guy's dead. He's not around anymore. And they tried to summon him through a Ouija board. This is when I was bringing up about Slender Man on the idea of a tulpa, that somebody can believe it so much that it actually comes into being.
Mhm.
That really brings up a weird kind of sketchy, or I'm a little bit skeptical on the concept of that could be true. I mean, if you convince yourself enough that something happened, you can convince yourself that that is what actually happened. You know what I mean? I think it's like that. I think like these scientists recorded seeing the ghosts that they talked about through the Ouija board, hearing it, doing these types of things. Like, and I'm hearing it, and I'm like, did they just really just literally convince themselves that the ghost was real? But I think if you get enough people believing in the mindset of something, you can actually maybe chalk it up into existence.
Yeah, that's actually a very interesting concept for sure. And when you talk about Ouija boards, we're actually doing our Halloween episode at I forget the name of it, but it's a hotel towards San Antonio that's supposed to be haunted, and they just renovated it and rented out the second floor to any people who want to stay the night. So we're going to do that and bring a Ouija board. And my buddy who we did the interview with about Bigfoot was like, "Dude, I wouldn't go 10 feet near a Ouija board." It's just weird how people have this stigma attached to it, like that it can actually legitimately, either curse you, or you can bring evil spirits into being, or you can actually communicate with, you know, dead spirits. And it's just weird. Like somebody the other day was on Twitter talked about how if I, have a piece of wood and try to communicate with spirits, like would it be scary until you start, painting letters on it, and then now it's a Ouija board and now it's scary. It's just like at what point, you know, does it is it considered a this weird supernatural spirit communication device?
I used to think
Um,
it was I think what makes it so weird and mysterious is the fact that they paint it and they do what you're saying. They make it look like something from what we would consider mysterious or supernatural. But at the same time, they sell it in Walmart. They sell it in Toys R Us. You could buy a Ouija board. You just have to be 8 and up. So, I mean, once I heard that, I immediately started chalking up kind of bullshit to the whole Ouija board idea. A bunch of kids playing around in the room, that's the worst thing you want to do. Summoning demons, the things they would do, like, I want limitless amounts of candy. It's like, all right, but I need your eternal soul. Done.
like
Candy.
that's fine.
You don't even want to think about it? No, 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 no. Candy. I want nothing but Three Musketeers and Sour Patch Kids, please. But I start hearing stuff like that. You go down the rabbit hole, sadly, if you end up chalking your life up to it. Like a lot of people bring up like weird things like, you don't believe in demons? What about witches? You don't like witches have been through history. Then they always bring up the fact of the Salem witch trials. You know a lot about the Salem witch trials.
Oh yeah, yeah. We did we talked about it in our second episode actually. And I went to Salem, Massachusetts, 4 years ago.
So
It was
what?
actually really interesting.
So tell me a little bit about that.
So the main thing when we went on different tours in Salem was like a lot of them were very, I don't want to say angry, but they were irritated. They would always tell us like, the stories and the movies and shows that you see on, TV and whatnot are terrible depictions of what actually went down in Salem. Like if I asked you like how many witches do you think were killed during the Salem witch trials, do you know?
Probably a good amount. I think mostly because of the fact, like, apparently a lot with those witch trials, the bodies actually floated, which means they weren't witches. So I think it was a way of like an easy divorce. Like the guy was just fed up with his wife, and he was like, "She's a fucking witch, burn her, drown her." And the next thing you know, he's like, "Oh, I don't have to deal with that anymore."
Thank you, and reset.
Yeah, exactly right.
It's it was actually only 20 witches that were buried. So you'd think like it'd be, in the hundreds or whatever, but it wasn't that many. Um and then we also did no burning of the witches in the US. It was actually just hanging. Burning was just a strictly European thing.
Didn't we drown them
Um
too? I was pretty sure we
uh,
tied rope around to like them to a rock, and then we threw them in like the river. Tried to hang them from bridges and stuff.
not to my knowledge. I mean that could be a possibility. I hadn't heard of it in the US anyway. Um yeah, it was super interesting to see like that whole area was still very Halloween like, even though we went in like the middle of the summer. And we went through an actual, building, like the house that was still there from the 1600s, back when it was happening. And they had, their whole living quarters were still it was renovated and looked, it was, I mean, if you had the same stuff from back then, it would have been all deteriorated. Um,
Well,
but it was really interesting to see that kind of stuff, like how they lived and how small the door, like I had to duck to get into the door. It was really small.
what's crazy is the fact that people like think like witches, they immediately think broom, green, weird mole on the nose, these types of things. And I always chalk like we have modern day witches. Technically, they're not really witches. They're called Wiccans. Like Wiccans are supposed to be people that use their magic or use their thing for healing purposes. Like those can be done with like psychic healers. Those types of people. Those are kind of a form of Wiccan. We have those. They adopted to a new modern society. Changed the name up a little bit. You don't want to be known as a witch or something. Honestly, keep the Wiccan name. That sounds badass. Sounds like something I'd use for World of Warcraft or something. But I chalk it up to like things don't ever expire really. They just kind of change form. We adapt to the new technology and new things like as society progresses. A lot of stuff does seem like it's kind of getting lost a little bit when it comes with creativity and people. I don't know if writing's going to be around forever. It's turning into typing now, so it's much easier. Every kid now, instead of getting a registered textbook to them, is now getting a tablet. I just think when it comes to any type of conspiracy theory or any types of things, it's not out of the realm of possibility. Do I believe in Scientology? Hell no. I think that's a load of crap. But I also don't like Tom Cruise, which is the reason why I won't believe in it. So, I mean, when I try and podcast and trying to understand as much as possible, I'm also hearing people explain things where I'm sitting there like, I can't believe that. But at the same time, I try and understand it from their side too. You know what I mean?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, you got to look at all, points of views from different things. And when you were talking about earlier, like the telephone game where, one kid starts with saying something and then he passes it along the line to the last kid and it's something completely different. I mean, that same concept applies to pretty much any story. I mean, it's kind of alleviated a little bit recently because of technology advances. You can actually like look up anything, but back in the day, it was just word of mouth, like, down the line, unless you had like a book. But back then it was rare for anyone to actually know how to read and write. Um, so it was just word of mouth going down the line, and then you hear a story, and then you kind of change up a detail or two here and there. By the time it gets down to two or three centuries later, it's something completely different.
Now, if I had to ask you one thing that you've kind of came along with all this dread talk stuff you've been doing these types of experiments and these types of things, what's one thing that you still are just like, nah, it's not real. It's unbelievable. No, not going to happen.
Um, Honestly, it's not one thing necessarily, like spirits or demons or whatever, like something like that, but it's the whole, like when people try to use orbs as evidence for a spirit being there. That's the one thing I'm just like, dude, like please stop. Like when you see camera footage of like here's somewhere in a prison and you see this yellow orb going across the screen, like dude, how like those places are all abandoned for the most part. They're not kept up with anymore. That could be dust, that could be a bug, that could be you know millions of things before it could be a spirit. So I'm not sure why people try to attribute that to, I mean, I guess it's their desperation to try to find something when they're out there looking, so they can attach their theory to whatever they see. But yeah, that would be my most I guess my pet peeve when it comes to the paranormal and spirits and whatnot.
They're also looking for so much evidence that they're like they don't ever find anything usually. So as soon as they try and chalk up the belief like this is it, like don't lose faith in us yet, we need funding, that type of thing. you know they end up something like that. It's like the same reason why a scientist discovers some bone from like a million years ago, and randomly right when their funding's about to be cut, like what about the 30 years before that, where it's like where you kept saying you were on the brink of it and then you just discovered it as like the minute we tell you we're about to shut it down, you're like, this is it, it's just an Australopithecus. You're like, what? Like it's this bone, and you take, okay, how do you know that? I just know, I'm an archaeologist. It's like, okay. Like I think people get scared because they don't ever want that mystery or belief to be kind of taken away from them. I think a lot of times you got to give up on something that's, you spend a lot of time into. Doesn't mean it doesn't need to be looked at later, but maybe we don't have the evidence or types of technology to be able to discover it yet.
Yeah, it's it's there's so much out there, man. I wouldn't doubt anything initially when people bring something up, because I mean, like you said earlier, this world has yet to be fully explored, and won't be for a long, long time, if ever. So I mean, I'm sure we'll see a bunch of weird stuff coming up in the
As long as
next
Bigfoot
next
comes
few
out,
years.
I mean, that's awesome. That's all I
Oh yeah.
need. He's in Area 51 or something, I think. That's what they keep in there is Bigfoot. He's just sitting there eating a bowl of Raisin Bran. Like, can I go back to the forest, please? Like, there's people throwing cigarettes, and you guys put out Smokey the Bear, and you took me down as your mascot. You guys are just dumb.
Unbelievable.
Exactly. So I want to give you here a minute at the end to be able to tell people where they can find your podcast and be able to look you up, man, because you have some pretty interesting content when it comes to the idea of supernatural. I think anybody that's open-minded should definitely check it out.
Yeah, thanks. I appreciate it. Yeah, you can find it on pretty much any major platform, Apple, Google, Spotify, Breaker, all that stuff. It's at Dread Talk Pod. That would be the social media handle for Twitter and Facebook, Instagram, all that jazz. But it's just called Dread Talk. It's two separate words on the podcast platforms. But yeah, we just talk about supernatural stuff, paranormal. Soon we're going to be diving into demonology, conspiracies, UFOs, stuff like that. Just all things kind of weird and out of the ordinary. So yeah,
Well, thank you
that's about it.
so much, Jeff, for being on the podcast. I really appreciate you taking the time to be on it. And stay tuned for another episode of Out of the Blank podcast.